Darjeeling station was built in 1950, replacing a wooden Victorian structure. Its sheer size indicates the importance of the railway half a century ago. Setting off to explore the town, one comes to the Mall with its old English buildings. Beyond lies Observatory Hill with its fascinating blend of religious traditions. It's an ancient Buddhist site once called Darjeeling, meaning place of thunder, and gave its name to present-day Darjeeling. The ritual bells echoing through the trees mark the Hindu shrines lower down the slopes. A more recent arrival on the scene, the Christian Church of St Andrew, is firmly established at the foot of the hill at the end of the Mall. Built in 1873, it forms a lasting memorial to the British community from the days of the Raj. Most of the permanent residents were tea planters, as distinct from government officials and the military, who formed a large shifting population. There are a few illustrious names, including that of General Lloyd, one of Darjeeling's founders, in 1839. But the Christian faith here doesn't just dwell in the past. Right next door is the Nepalese Christian church, whose adherents leave the visitor in no doubt that theirs is a vibrant faith looking more to the hereafter. On the opposite flank of Observatory Hill lies the Windermere Hotel, a favourite with tourists for its atmosphere of the old Raj. Rather like the railway, it's not an intentional time warp, just something that works so well there seems little point in changing it. The most recent innovation is the telephone, installed in 1950. The new railway station was built in the same year, but the original wooden carriage shed was left intact and is now used to house the locomotives. The engines and their shed are both about the same age, and the work practices don't seem to have changed much either. But elsewhere on the railway, the pace of change has accelerated, especially in the last 2 decades, as the following film shows. The most striking difference is on the famous loops. This was Batasia in 1990, still in its original state, the only addition in over 100 years being a village football pitch. It's now been transformed into a landscaped memorial park with its centrepiece, the new Gurkha monument. Agony Point Loop now has a tourist hotel on the site, and the view from the train is further obscured by new bushes and trees in the public area. It's hard to believe this was the same place in 1990, when a near-perfect view of the Mahaldaran Hills was framed by just 4 tall sal trees. passenger train was caught here rounding the curve into Mahanadi station, where a short freight was waiting to pass. It was actually only a railway stores train, freight service being already discontinued. The line once had 600 freight wagons, all of which have now been scrapped. But back in 1982, freight trains ran every day and the road was almost empty. Some goods, however, were still being carried the traditional way. The through mail train had 4 coaches and ran in 2 sections, the second following hard on the heels of the first. Despite its apparently casual operating methods, the line has always had an extremely good safety record. In February 1990, Tindaria Shed was called upon to prepare an extra locomotive for a VIP special. The train looked perfect, with locomotive and vintage saloons all in ex-works condition. The VIP? None other than Sir Robert Reid, retiring chairman of British Rail, enjoying a brief holiday as the guest of Indian Railways. Just to be on the safe side, a relief loco brought up the rear. While Sir Robert was being entertained in Darjeeling, we looked at the ordinary train service. The village of Sanada was the setting here for a rooftop view of the early morning school train entering the main street. Local patronage of the trains was good at this time, having had several years to recover since the service had last been cut due to landslips. a typically busy scene at Darjeeling as the local train weaves its way into the station. The vintage saloons can be seen on the left, waiting for Sir Robert Reed's party to return from a private lunch in the town, presumably not at the Shangri-La. Meanwhile, the headlight for the special was checked in case of fog. With every piece of brass well polished, the locomotive crew waited patiently. What couldn't be polished had been painted instead. Sir Robert, in his anorak, posed with his hosts for a group photograph before setting off. Curious shed staff attended the departure of special saloons Everest and Himalayan Princess into the gathering mist. Fortunately, visits like Sir Robert's have over the years fostered international awareness of the Darjeeling Railway, with the happy result that it's now been designated a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Fixtures, such as track and buildings, are covered, giving some protection for the future. The old station at Goom may be a lost cause, though. It might be easy to remove the advertisement hoardings, but the end of the roof boarded in with the station name and the concrete boots now worn by the once slender iron columns are probably there to stay. This is how it looked in 1990, with its high, spacious canopy roof, before the alterations were made. At unspoilt Sonada, the sole surviving Darjeeling Himalayan Company crest will hopefully be restored, possibly reverting to its old colour scheme. The charming station at Sukna may benefit too, perhaps no longer changing colour every year. The zigzags, frustrating for the ordinary traveller, are already billed as a tourist attraction. Paradoxically, the case for UNESCO heritage status rested heavily on the charm of the locomotives, but these stars of the show, defined as movable assets, are technically excluded from the scheme, which has its origins in the protection of listed buildings. Funds to maintain the steam locomotives have now to be found by Indian Railways from their tourist promotion budget. Locomotive number 779, Himalayan Bird, the oldest B-class loco in working order, built in 1892, is kept at Darjeeling for seasonal tourist shuttles to Batasia Loop, at a premium fare, of course. Voluntary funding is now important too. The restoration of one of the vintage saloons is being sponsored by the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway Society in the UK. Society members had the pleasure of riding in it during their visit to Darjeeling in March 2000. They witnessed the first public appearance of newly restored Baby Sivok, an event that clearly defined steam's changing role. This little-known engine had been acquired by the Darjeeling's original owners for track repair work and shunting in 1911. She had spent her last 40 years on display at Siliguri Junction. Why she was chosen for the restoration wasn't clear, as she can only pull 3 tons on Darjeeling's gradients, just under half her own weight. But she looked pretty enough, with Darjeeling-style saddle tank and coal bunker softening the austere outline of the German Feldbahn loco she once was. As she steamed up towards Tindaria station, it was hoped she might double head or bank the Society's special train, but it was not to be. Baby Sivok had never done passenger work and was not about to start now. She shadowed the special as far as Agony Point, so at least she could be seen out on the line. Train engine, an unaccustomed follower posed on the loop for the group's cameras, and then Baby Sivok bowed out after a brief debut of uncertain significance. Retired Darjeeling locomotives seem to be a popular choice for public display all over India. An interesting exception to the usual B-class tank engine is to be found in a park in Bombay. This elegant C-class Pacific tender engine was one of 2 delivered to the Darjeeling Company in 1914 for branch line service on the plains. Perhaps one day it could steam again on excursions from Siliguri to the forest at Sukna. But whatever happens on the heritage front, so long as the Darjeeling Railway survives, the unique relationship between the line and the people it serves will survive with it. The railway has become as much a part of the culture of the hill people as the tea gardens, the schools, and the Himalayas themselves. Hopefully the skills of the locomotive crews, perfected over the last 120 years, will continue to be handed down so that future generations can still enjoy the sight of these gallant little engines on the toy train to the clouds.